Ever imagine learning about like a global event but through a play?
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're doing today. We're taking this deep dive into a Hindi language play, and it's all about the COVID-19 pandemic in India, specifically like those really early lockdown
Oh,
days.
yeah. Fascinating approach.
Yeah.
You get that like immediacy and emotional depth, you know,
hmm
that you don't always get from like just raw data or news reports.
Exactly. The play is called Haya Klantwari, which means closed city, closed doors, and it was published just last year in 2025. We've got excerpts to like really immerse us in it. Plus, we have a testimonial from a literature professor who gives us even more analysis.
Really nice. That's a great combination. Gives us the experience and then some expert interpretation too.
So our mission today, we want to uncover any unique insights that this play has to offer. How does it capture the human impact of the pandemic, especially in a rural Indian village, far from like the usual city-centric pandemic narratives we always hear?
I love that.
Okay, so picture this. We're transported to this village, 80 kilometers outside of a city, and we meet two brothers, Vithal and Baparao. They both have wives.
Mhm.
And then there's this headman, the Nuram. And he kind of has this, well, shady reputation.
Right away, that setting is key. The playwright is deliberately like shifting our focus. Remember, the pandemic wasn't just some city thing. Rural communities had their own unique challenges, often with less access to resources and information.
For sure, and the playwright doesn't waste any time highlighting that. So when that lockdown hits, Baparao, he initially mistakes it for something completely different. Another government program, like sterilization.
Uh-huh. It's a funny moment, but it speaks to a very real issue.
Yeah.
Like all the confusion and fear surrounding the pandemic, especially in these places where information doesn't always flow that freely. Imagine trying to grasp this new threat, this invisible threat, when you have a totally different frame of reference.
Absolutely. It's a brilliant way to show us that human side of policies, how they actually played out on the ground. And then things take a turn, a serious turn. The play compares COVID-19 to the plague.
It's a chilling parallel, right?
Hmm.
Not just some echo from history. It's almost foreshadowing what might happen, all the potential devastation. And remember, we're in a village. Healthcare is already limited.
Oh, yeah.
So this comparison, it really ramps up the tension. It's like saying, get ready. Things are going to get real.
No kidding, and they do. So the main plot kicks in with Baparou needing emergency care for appendicitis. But because of the lockdown, all transport is stopped.
This is where the abstract becomes visceral.
Yeah.
It's not just an order on a piece of paper. It's a brother fighting time, fighting impossible odds to save his sibling. And those restrictions become intensely personal all of a sudden.
Absolutely. And we see that play out in the emotions between the brothers. Vithal, he's the younger one, and he's determined. But then Baparou, he's stuck between fear and despair.
Right. The playwright doesn't shy away from those emotions either.
Mm-hmm.
And within their struggle, they weave in these themes that are so deeply rooted in Indian culture. Brotherly love, resourcefulness, and this concept of buenos, which emphasizes action over accepting fate.
So no sitting around,
Mm-hmm.
which leads us to, I like to call this the bullet cart epic. Everything's shut down. So Vithal decides that their only option is his bullet cart, pulled by Sarja and Raja.
Yeah, and it becomes a really powerful symbol, more than just transportation. This bullock cart represents a traditional way of life, this resilience. Even in the face of modern disruptions, it's almost like the playwright is holding up a mirror to India itself, this blend of ancient tradition with rapid modernization.
Love that. And the journey itself is just full of little details. So like when a rope breaks, that's a bad omen in their culture.
Oh, yeah. But how Vithal reacts is interesting, right? He's obviously rooted in his culture.
Yeah.
But he chooses action instead of giving in to superstition. He fixes the rope.
Yeah.
And he just keeps going. It shows that blend of traditional values, but with this modern mindset,
Yeah.
a willingness to challenge those beliefs if he has to.
He's adaptable. He's got to be.
Yeah.
And just when it seems like they might actually make it, tragedy hits. It's heartbreaking.
And the play does such a good job here mirroring real-life lockdown challenges. Think back to all those news reports. Accidents, no access to help, the emotional toll of being isolated, all captured in this one scene.
It's a lot. Sarja, one of the bullocks, breaks his leg. Baparou's in pain and gets injured even more. And then Raja, the other bullock, he gets trapped. It's just pure helplessness.
Stranded on a deserted road.
Yeah.
With a sick brother, injured animals, and no way to call for help. That's the reality the playwright is putting us in. We feel the pandemic's weight.
It's a lot to take in. And it's a stark reminder that these weren't just headlines. This was people's lives, real suffering. But then, just when all hope seems lost, they meet a police officer, PSI Duraj Kumar. And he's incredibly kind and helpful.
This is so crucial. Because the play isn't just doom and gloom. It's not just about hardship and failure. It shows us human kindness, individuals rising above the chaos. A subtle reminder that even in a pandemic, when the world feels like it's falling apart, there's still compassion.
It's like a breath of fresh air.
Right.
But just as we're getting a little relief, the playwright throws in this subplot that adds another layer of complexity. And it involves Deniram, that headman we talked about.
Oh, yeah. So while the brothers are away, he tries to take advantage of Rukmini, Vithal's wife.
It's
Dark. But it raises a question. How did the lockdown make existing social problems even worse?
especially in a village, where those power dynamics can be even more pronounced. It's like the playwright is using Deniram to critique those power structures and how vulnerable women were, especially in isolated communities during lockdown.
Exactly. And how Rukmini responds is fascinating. She doesn't just sit there, she fights back. She uses sugarcane to beat Daniram. It's funny, but empowering.
It's both. It's a great example of how the playwright balances these heavy themes with moments of humor and wit. She's not a victim, and her resourcefulness is brilliant. Then, just when you think you've seen it all, Daniram supposedly dies from COVID, but then
He comes back.
he does on the funeral pyre.
It's hilarious. It's
Yeah.
almost unbelievable. But it's a scene with so much meaning.
It is. The playwright is kind of poking fun at all that fear and misinformation surrounding COVID, how easily rumors and panic can spread. But it's also kind of a commentary on Daniram himself.
Yeah. Like, did he really deserve to escape death? The play leaves that open for us to think about.
Yeah.
Morality, consequences, and how a crisis can warp those things.
And just as everyone's processing that, a second lockdown is imposed, which makes the journey back from the city even more complicated.
Oh, man. Talk about insult to injury. This part really highlights just how cyclical the pandemic was. The constant uncertainty, people having to adapt over and over again. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It was wave after wave of challenges.
It was, and it's Rukmini, again, who steps up. She figures out how to get everyone home. She's like the unsung hero.
Truly, she is. But just as they're settling back into village life, the play hits us with its most powerful blow. We're taken straight to the heart of that oxygen shortage crisis in India. Vithal gets COVID, and his experience becomes a window into the pandemic's psychological toll.
Yeah, it's heavy.
We're not just talking about physical symptoms anymore. We're seeing the fear, the isolation, the mental and emotional strain.
And he has this terrifying dream where he meets God of Death. It's vivid, unsettling. It feels like more than just a bad dream.
It's a visualization of his internal state, wouldn't you say? He's dealing with his brother's illness and now his own mortality. It's like the playwright is showing us the burden of the pandemic, the physical and psychological burden. And this is where we'll pause for now, leaving you to wonder about Vithal's fate and what else this play has to teach us.
Man, that dream sequence, that was a powerful image. It really shows how COVID was more than just a physical health crisis.
It really does. It gets at that mental and emotional toll, the anxiety, that dread that so many people faced. And as Vithal gets sicker, we see Rukmini's desperation to find oxygen. She even trades her Mangal Sutra to get an oxygen cylinder.
Wow. For those who might not know, the Mangal Sutra is a necklace. And in Hinduism, it symbolizes a woman's marriage. It's incredibly important. So for her to trade that, that's a powerful statement.
It really is. About her desperation, the lengths that people went to.
It's a testament to people's love and resilience, even when things seemed impossible.
Yeah. It's like this small act becomes this huge symbol of all the sacrifices people made, all across India.
And then we get to what seems like, at first, a bittersweet ending. Vidal dies. Or so we think. Rukmini is devastated. And the playwright really highlights how dehumanizing those pandemic protocols were, when she's only allowed to see his body from far away.
Yeah, that's a poignant moment. It speaks to the loss and disconnect that so many families felt. Not being able to grieve properly, say goodbye in person. It adds another layer of tragedy to an already awful situation.
It's true. Even in death, the pandemic took away closure and connection. But then comes this huge twist. The Vizal who died, it wasn't our Vithal.
It's such a surprise. It's a relief, but it also reminds us of how massive the pandemic was. It's like the playwright is saying, yes, this family's story matters, but it's just one story out of millions.
Right, millions. You're left with this shock. Like, wow, even in a small village, the pandemic's reach was huge. It really underscores the idea that statistics just can't capture the human cost of something like this.
Absolutely. Every number is a life, a story, a family forever changed. And while the play shows us that loss, it ends with resilience. with Rukmini's choice to donate that oxygen cylinder, the one that could have saved her husband.
It's an incredible act of selflessness. And it really speaks to the idea that even when we suffer, there's still hope. There's still compassion. It's like she takes her own tragedy and turns it into hope for someone else.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It reminds us that even in darkness, we can adapt, endure, find meaning in the hard stuff. So now, in addition to the play itself, we have this testimonial, and it's written by Professor Mangalarani.
Yes, she gives us so much context. She praises the playwright for capturing those early lockdown days, that fear, the uncertainty, but also the humor and resilience.
She really highlights how universal the play is. Even though it's set in a specific place and time, the emotions, the struggles, the triumphs, they speak to anyone who's lived through the pandemic, no matter where they were or what they went through.
It's a reminder that we were all in it together, in a way. And she points out how the playwright uses humor. And she says it doesn't take away from how serious things were, but it gives us relief and even some sharp commentary.
Yeah, like Danaram's death in Revival. It's funny, sure, but it makes us think about his actions, his character, even karma.
Like the playwright is using humor to make us think, to confront those uncomfortable truths. Professor Rani does such a nice job of summarizing the play's message. She says it's not just about lockdown, it's about human connection, resilience, and finding hope in dark times.
She's right. That's what makes the attendant so powerful. It's a pandemic play, but it's also a story about humanity, our shared experiences, what makes us vulnerable, but also our incredible capacity for love, compassion, and resilience.
It makes you think, right?
Hmm.
What other perspectives, other insights could we get from art, plays, music, even dance, to understand the events that shape our world?
That's a powerful thought. We always think of knowledge as coming from textbooks or studies, but art connects with us emotionally. It makes us feel things in a way data can't.
It's like that saying, truth is stranger than fiction. But here, fiction helps us understand the truth on a deeper level.
It does. And that's what makes this deep dive so great. We're not just learning about the pandemic, we're feeling it through the characters, and that stays with you.
It does. It's a reminder that history isn't just dates and events. It's people's stories, lives impacted.
Right. And those stories can tell us so much about society, our values, strengths, our weaknesses. This play, with its focus on rural India, shows us that the pandemic didn't affect everyone the same way.
Some communities faced way more challenges, losses, but maybe even more resilience too.
It's important to remember that. It's a call for empathy, understanding others, even those whose lives seem so different from our own. And that brings us back to your question, what does it mean to really understand a global event?
Exactly. Does a play, with its focus and emotion, offer a different kind of knowledge than, say, a scientific paper or a news report?
Absolutely. While those sources give us important data and context, Pile Guy gives us something else, an emotional connection, a glimpse into the human heart of the pandemic. It lets us walk in other people's shoes, feel their fears, their hopes, their losses, and their triumphs.
It's like the difference between reading about a hurricane and actually being in one. The play doesn't just tell us about the pandemic, it makes us feel it.
And that's powerful. It stays with you. It shapes how you see the world.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Dr. Code, what's the one thing you want our listener to think about?
I want them to remember that even in global crises, when it feels like the world is closing in, the human spirit is strong. We find ways to connect, to be there for each other, to find hope even when things are dark. And that resilience, that love and compassion, those are things to celebrate, to cherish.
Beautifully said. And to our listener, if this has made you curious, I encourage you to check out Ikaw Ekamklueman or any art that explores what it was like to live through the pandemic. You might be surprised by what you find.
And remember, it can be a play, a song, a painting, a dance. Art has this power to show us what it means to be human, to make us feel and think and connect in deep ways. So take the opportunity to learn and grow through art.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time. It really strikes me how this play, it's both so specific and universal at the same time. You know, it's about this one village in India, but the things it explores, fear, isolation, that resilience, those family bonds, those are things we can all relate to.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It speaks to the power of art, to go beyond those boundaries, to tap into these human experiences that connect us all.
For sure. And it makes me think about how we always use data, those statistics, to try to understand global events. But what are we missing when we only focus on the numbers?
Well, we lose sight of the people, the human part, the emotional toll, all the individual stories that
Right?
make up the bigger picture. And that's
Wow.
where art like this play is so important. It fills in those gaps, gives
Yeah.
us a look into those lived experiences,
Mm.
the ones behind the statistics.
It's like, it's the difference between knowing, like, oh, millions of people were affected by the pandemic versus actually seeing how it played out in people's lives, feeling their fear, their hope, all their struggles.
Exactly. And that connection, that emotional connection, it can be so powerful.
Yeah.
Helps us understand each other better. It can even inspire us to do something.
So is it essential, would you say, to explore art like this play to really understand something like the pandemic?
Oh, it's a valuable tool for
Mhm.
sure. It's not about replacing the data or science, but adding to it,
Yeah.
giving it that emotional depth, that human connection.
It's like, imagine a tapestry. The data gives us the outline, the structure,
Yeah,
but it's the threads, the colors, the textures that make it really come alive.
I love that. And this play, that Klimi Kunkumish, with its characters, its language, all those moments of humor, moments of sadness, it gives us those threads. So we experience the pandemic in a way that makes us think and feel.
So as we finish up this deep dive, what's the main message you want our listener to take away?
I want them to remember this.
Yeah.
Even in the middle of a crisis, even when it feels like the world is closing in, the human spirit is powerful. We find ways to connect, to support each other, to have hope even when things are dark. And that resilience, that love and compassion, we should celebrate those things.
So well said. And to our listener, if this conversation sparked your curiosity, go check out Teenage Over Cat or any art that explores the pandemic. You might be surprised at what you find.
And remember, it could be a play, a song, a painting, whatever. Art has the power to show us what it means to be human, to make us feel, think, connect on a deeper level. So use art to learn and grow.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.